I'm Sean Garrity, and we're going to talk about my film Blood Pressure, and you're watching the Canadian Film Review.
Tell us a little bit about Blood Pressure.
Blood Pressure is the story of a woman, Nicole, who lives in a giant cavernous house in the suburbs, has 2 teenage kids, and is married to an overworked actuary. And she works as a pharmacist, which, according to research that I did, is the least satisfying of all careers in Canada. And she is at a point in her life where she's just kind of asking, like, is there nothing more than this? And for her, it's a very kind of profound question right at this moment, which is where the film starts. She gets a letter in the mail, and the letter says, I've been watching you, and I know you, and I know that your life could be more than what it is. And if you're interested in pursuing that, there's a green card in the envelope with this letter. Put it in your window by tomorrow night, and I'll send you another letter. If, on the other hand, you're freaked out and you think I'm a crazy stalker, throw the letter away. You'll never hear from me again.
And that was a really interesting premise, because you kind of follow this character and her journey along. And I really felt like I mean, as a woman, I don't know what I would have necessarily done with that note. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you're deeply unhappy in your own life, it's like, I don't know, that would be exhilarating. Also terrifying, because, it makes a good headline.
I'm glad that you say that, because, I mean, there is a sense that I'm always interested in, that I think most of us are interested in, that in our lives in a sense, we pass by open doors from time to time, decisions that we could make, choices that we could take that would change our lives. And I think most people, if they're like me, are too chicken shit to actually do it, right? I mean, to really make that bold choice and say, all right, I'm going to go through that door, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's going to be something that is life-changing. Most of us are too scared to go ahead with that. But of course, what's interesting as a writer and as a filmmaker is the story of someone who decides to do that. And part of our job, of course, in getting the script ready to shoot was creating a character who we believe would do that, right? I mean, it's very easy to have a character make a choice in a film. I think it's another thing entirely to have a character make a choice that's a believable choice.
Yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time building her as a character so that she was kind of destined to make that, plot-defining choice.
And I never felt while watching the movie like I was about to enter into a horror movie. Like, it was like, oh, don't go through that door, there's impending doom. Like, I never felt like I was, shouting at the screen saying that. I always felt like she was slowly becoming more empowered by the decisions she was making. Even if they weren't necessarily good decisions, you still felt like she was making those choices very actively. There was a real gray area in throughout the whole movie that you kind of walked very comfortably along, which I think it's very hard to do in films personally.
Yeah, I mean, for her there was constantly, and I worked very closely with Michelle Giroux, who plays Nicole, to draw out what the choice was at every step. I mean, because, and at every step, it is really, for us, it was this question of this, in a sense, kind of abyss of meaninglessness, to overstate it, right? I mean, what happens if you don't make this choice? Usually in a thriller, it's like, if you don't make this choice, then your child will die at the hand of a kidnapper or some ridiculous thing, right? And that's what's at stake. But for us, it was interesting is, what if that's the thing that's at stake would be to go back to that cavernous house in the suburbs and continue to live that life that you feel has kind of lost a lot of its meaning in the face of this other greater possibility.
Yeah, yeah. And you slowly see Nicole becoming empowered by that. Like, you see her getting stronger in everything she does, and literally changing that home life, changing that quiet mundaneness of her world by getting braver with these letters. I mean, you worked very closely with Michelle, you were saying. Is it Giroux?
Yes. Yeah, Michelle Giroux.
Oh, she was amazing. She was absolutely incredible in that part. Tell me about working with her more.
She is such a brave actor. And originally, I didn't know who she was, and I had intended to cast somebody else in that role. I was actually between 2 other actors, neither of whom was Michelle. And I brought her in. She's a friend of a friend, and I brought her in because I was doing these long sort of improvised auditions where we were doing sort of chemistry tests, and I don't audition with a reader. I put two actors together and have them run through a number of exercises. So in looking for the husband, I brought Michelle in to play the wife off of possible husbands. And in the course of doing that, I just kind of thought, oh my God, who's this incredible woman who brings this incredible intelligence and depth and kind of steely courage to this character.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wasn't convinced that it wasn't a fluke, so I brought her back like 3 times before I finally realized that she was the real deal.
Yeah.
And so kind of really changed my outlook on the character. And I, as the director, became excited about how I was now seeing my lead character as a result of applying this actor to it, right? Michelle as Nicole was a very exciting character, and it was kind of a different character than what we had envisioned at a sort of a script stage.
Yeah.
And that was tremendously exciting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
She there's a scene in the movie where she has a huge amount of range. Like she's talking to the pharmacist, and she switches on this kind of manipulative charm. And you know, you think at that point, like you think back to the beginning of the movie, and you think, you know, that I guess that was in her. She just never brought it out, you know. So I really felt like she had this huge amount of range, and she was bringing quite a few different personalities within this particular character.
Yeah, and she is, I mean, she spends most of her time doing Shakespeare at Stratford. So, I mean, this is an actor who really knows what she's doing and really has, I think, a firm grasp on the craft. And, you know, I give most of the credit for sculpting that character and articulating the arc of that character and the slow, gradual empowerment of that character. I mean, most of that's Michelle, just doing her homework and being on top of it and bringing stuff that, you know, surprised and delighted us day to day on set. Yeah.
Now, you also worked with Jonas on this, and you worked with him on My Awkward Sexual Adventure. And I kind of also think he's a shining star of Canadian film. He's naturally very funny and very comfortable with humor in his role. So even though this role was very serious on many levels, there was also a sense of you know, like the more comical parts at the beginning where we're getting introduced to the character. So tell me about working with him kind of on the long term, as well as working with him on this project.
Right. This is actually our 5th film together. And, you know, I mean, I was really interested in getting Jonas to play this character because it's a side of him that we don't see on the screen very often. And because he's my best friend and he lives a few blocks away and our daughters play together in his swimming pool, and I mean, I see these other sides of Jonas that maybe a casting director or a TV director who just sees him once in a blue moon wouldn't necessarily see. And I kind of go, okay, there's all this other really interesting stuff that Jonas can bring that other directors aren't asking for. And I think it's really, I mean, the more of a relationship that I have with an actor, the greater the sense I get of their range and the things that I can ask them to do. And so because Jonas and I have been working together for so long, there are a lot of different parts that I'm very excited to get him to play.
So, I mean, we're already at a point where this film's had a long run. It was theatrically released when?
So we started in February with it, and just to backtrack, I mean, what you might find interesting as someone who is an aficionado of Canadian film is being my 5th feature. I was not very interested in having my distributor do what most Canadian distributors do, right? Which is to release the film in 3 or 4 cities and let it play for a week and then get their TV sales.
I was heading this way with the conversation, by the way, so carry on.
So, you know, luckily this film is distributed by Mongrel Media, who did my first 2 movies as well. And we have a very good relationship, and you know, it's one of these things where most of the guys actually live in the neighborhood, and we see them at the playground as our daughters are on the swing together. So, you know, when we got the contract together, I said, you know, I'm really interested in having a long theatrical run with this film because I think it really has legs. And they said, well, we don't think that. We think that it'll do really well on downloads and that it'll do really well on video and VOD, but we just don't think that the demographic for this film is going to come to the theater. And so we had a disagreement, and it became clear to me that what they intended to do with the film was not where I saw it going theatrically. And because we have this great relationship, I said, okay, well, why don't we do this? You guys do the Netflix and the everything else, and I'll do the theatrical by myself.
Yeah.
And hopefully you will support me in the sense of like when I don't know what to do and I call you and I'm like, theater is asking this. What are they talking about? You guys can be kind of a support network. And they're like, yeah, very cool with that. So I released it myself. And one of the things that I have always been, it's always been one of my pet peeves, even with My Awkward Sexual Adventure, which came out, also this year. And in my opinion, should have had a much more successful theatrical run than it did, is that very, very often I think distributors will sort of say, okay, we're going to release it in Montreal, Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Toronto. We're going to spend our very small amount of publicity money in Toronto, and we're just going to let the rest of the country hang.
Yeah.
And so it dies in the rest of the country because nobody knows that it's there.
Yeah. They don't.
Right?
There's not the information beforehand, in my opinion, so that they can get excited about it. And then when it comes to their theater, they don't even know it's heading into that theater on that day.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I remember playing my second film at Tinseltown in Vancouver, and I was out there for it, and almost no one came, and a good number of the people who came were late for their own film and just kind of thought, "What's this? I've never heard of it. I'm going to check it out."
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't really build a film industry on that, right?
But we are.
And nonetheless, we are. Yes. So I sort of said, maybe I'll put my money where my mouth is on this because it's a filmmaker hobby, all of us, to complain about our distributors and what they do with our films in theaters. So I thought maybe I'll try and do what I think should be done, which is release it city by city, and so that I can focus on each city.
Yeah.
So, for example, this week, all week, I've been, and actually for the past week and a half, I've been on the phone with the press in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Right, and TV and radio and blogs and the Georgia Straight and the West Ender, although that's not in print anymore. It's kind of, I don't know where it is, but they're still working there, so it's somewhere.
Whatever you contacted them, that's the important thing.
We did an interview. It's going to appear somewhere. And I just don't think that I would have had the time to do that if I was releasing it in Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg, and Vancouver at the same time.
Yeah.
Because press, as you know, I mean, everyone wants to be in the press, and everybody who's got an event at a community center and everything else is calling them to say, talk about my event, and you really have to keep on them.
Yeah. I don't think after a filmmaker's made a film anymore, it's not our model in Canada, and I think we have to do just like you're saying, try and restructure it a little bit. I don't think a filmmaker can make a film and then send it away, you know what I mean, and say somebody else deal with the distribution of it and how the popularity of it's going to come about, because we're seeing a lot of independent Canadian films now doing exceptionally well because the filmmakers are taking it from city to city. They're drawing the actors into the conversation and that type of thing. So I think this is a wonderful. How has it been working for you, this type of setup, this model with you going from city to city theatrically and Mongrel dealing with the VOD side of it?
Well, it's great because, I mean, it's what we can do, right? I mean, Mongrel really just doesn't, not just Mongrel, I mean, E1 even more so. And, I mean, a lot of these guys, they just don't have the resources to be able to promote it in every single city in Canada independently, right? I mean, not a lot of people come to the cinema anymore unless it's Iron Man 3. And so you're not seeing a whole whack-a-dough. Yeah. You're seeing enough to support the marketing effort and a little bit more. So if you're doing it by yourself, that's fine.
Yeah.
If you're a giant company with overhead and a bunch of employees, I think there's a cost-benefit analysis there that just doesn't hold up. And so in the case of this film, I mean, I've been tremendously lucky. When we finish, we're doing Vancouver this Friday, so tomorrow, and then the following week we open in Saskatoon and Winnipeg, and then we're done. Yeah. And when we're done, it will have been 25 cinemas in 21 cities.
Wow.
We held over in most of those cities. And in some cases, like Toronto, we held over for 7 weeks.
Yeah.
And a big part of the reason was, that I tried to keep it in the air. Yeah. Right? So, I mean, we do a week and we have a good week. And whereas a lot of Canadian distributors would go, okay, good, that one's done.
Yeah.
I was very much active on social networks and buying little bits of advertising and still trying to get whatever press I could to keep it, up so that people knew that it was there. And in fact, in Toronto, our third week was our best week.
Yeah.
So we built up, and then, and 7 weeks certainly is the longest run that I have had. At the same time, my Awkward Sexual Adventure is playing, we actually had a week overlap where I had two cities, two films playing in the city. I should have taken a picture because
you did one of these, eh?
Yes. But, they had just the opposite. They put it out their first week and they did some decent press and we got some decent numbers. And the producers went back to them and said, okay, now we're in our second week. Now it's really important to do an advertising buy and whatever else. And they said, no, we're done now. The film is on its own, which means it's going to die.
Which is a shame because it's hilarious. I died of embarrassment watching that movie, and I love that feeling. The more uncomfortable, the better. So, I think it worked for Ricky Gervais. I think it can work for a Canadian feature. So I think I was really sad to see it just kind of not reach its potential in that way. But again, it's that publicity and promotion, and you're going up against Iron Man 3 or whatever the newest superhero. But and as well, I feel a little bit like we're also hungry for good content. I have a feeling that, personally, I go to the theater, I'm a little tired with seeing, males save the world. I am not the 18 to something male demographic.
You don't want to see us save the world anymore? I don't, what is that?
So I identified more with Nicole, and blood pressure, because to me that felt more realistic in my world and my experiences, and I feel like there isn't a level, like you saying, your blood pressure has essentially built, it's built its audience because there are people out there who are going, not just, I didn't get into Superman, I might as well go see blood pressure, but, but are saying this I identify with.
Yeah, and we have a really large following on Facebook. In every city we go, we kind of gather people who are interested in the film, and we're talking about it, and hopefully that'll help it when it gets out on iTunes and everything else. That's the plan anyway, right? I mean, get people to sort of know about it in all these different cities, and even the ones that don't get a chance to go see it when it comes out, they're like, oh yeah, I heard about that. And so there's hopefully some value there. Time will tell. But I also got a real sense doing this of some of the challenges that distributors face. Whereas I used to be the filmmaker, like so many of us, who were like, those damn distributors, they're, destroying our industry. Now I kind of have a better sense of some of the challenges that they're up against. My Awkward Sexual Adventure, May 1st, we were just kicked out of everywhere that we were playing because May 1st is the official start of the summer for Hollywood blockbusters. So it doesn't matter how well you're doing and how much money you're making, they sweep you aside because now it's Hollywood blockbuster season.
Right.
And what do you do with that if you're a distributor? That's just, you're done. And there were a lot of other challenges I noticed that were interesting that kind of gave me a new appreciation for what they do. At the same time, like you're saying, I'm a big fan of counter programming. And I don't think Canadian distributors do it enough. So example, tomorrow it's July long weekend, Canada Day weekend. Most distributors are not putting Canadian films out because they think it's this is a Hollywood blockbuster, it's a big weekend. And my feeling is always like, well, sure, but not everybody wants to go see Transformers. Traditionally, when you do that and you just wall to wall all the theaters in town with The Hobbit or whatever, people who want to see something independent, alternative, whatever, they just stay home. And we should always have something in theaters for that demographic.
Because I still think that you'll get a strong audience for an independent film in that case, because they will go to that weekend because they have that weekend off or whatever, and they're not planning on seeing Transformers or whatever. So I agree with you. I think that's a definite possibility. So tell me what the life of this is then. From here on out, what have you got coming up for, you said 2 more theatrical releases, and then what happens?
Well, and then we go to, in Canada, then we will shift actually pretty much immediately. I think the week after, I think when we're playing in Winnipeg and Saskatoon, we're actually already online.
Okay.
And both those theaters said that they didn't have a problem with that they believe that it's a separate demographic, the downloading demographic and the go to the art house cinema demographic. So we finish Vancouver, we open on, I think, iTunes and Amazon and Netflix and only Mongrel knows where. And I think the route from it then will be that Mongrel will take care of it, as they have 2 of my previous films, and they put it on. I think they will put it on Super Channel, and I'm not sure what public broadcaster is going to pick it up, but it'll online, TV, DVD, eventually Air Canada. That's kind of the thing for it in Canada. I just got back from Paris, where it played at a festival there, and we, I think, have sold it, or we're just about to sell it to a French distributor who's going to release it theatrically in France. And someone picked it up at Cannes to release it theatrically in Hungary and Russia and the Baltic states. And we're working on a number of other territories. I have a really great sales agent, and they are also very big fans of the film. And so, we're looking at it having kind of a long international life.
I think you're going to be huge in France, because didn't My Awkward Sexual Adventure get picked up in France as well? It's going to be like, nobody will know you in Canada, but everybody will be like, Sean Garrity film is coming out in France. Sean Garrity.
Yeah, that would be lovely. And as long as everyone continues to not know me here, then happier am I.
Now, just to wrap up, let me know what are the dates for in Vancouver and Saskatchewan? Where are they playing? Let's check that out.
So the film opens tomorrow night. That is June the 28th in Vancouver at the Van City. It's a theater I've been trying to get into for years. I love that cinema. I'm so happy they decided to program it.
Nice.
And First Weekend Club is doing a kind of a kickoff, and I think they're having a reception for it. And I'll be doing a Q&A via Skype. So I'll be the giant head who gets to say "People of Earth" at the beginning of the. And then the following week, which is July 5th, is the Friday. It's opening at the Cinematheque in Winnipeg and the Broadway in Saskatoon. And the Broadway is a great cinema, and as is the Cinematheque. The Cinematheque, interestingly, is actually the cinema where it began. And so our very first date back in February was the Winnipeg Cinematheque.
Oh, nice.
And because of course that's where I'm from. And it's sold out, and they turn people away, like even on the Tuesday and the Wednesday nights. And so they kind of have it back by popular demand, which is exciting.
Nice. And what is your next project?
Don't know. We have a whole bunch. My feeling is always you put a bunch of things on the stove and then eat the one that doesn't burn. So it'll be one of those. I mean, Jonas and I are developing another project that is, Buffalo Gals is involved in Winnipeg, and we're very excited about it. And we have a comedy that we're developing that we're very excited about. And then I have a couple of projects that I'm writing myself, a comedy and a kind of another blood pressure style independent show that within the next year or two, I'm hoping that we'll be able to shoot. But we'll see. Until there's money in the bank, there's no movie. So at the moment, there's no money in any of those bank accounts. So they could get shot next week. They could get shot never.
Well, that's a wonderfully vague answer to end on. So good. I hope nothing gets burned on the stove. Let's put it that way.
Me too. Yeah.
I hope it all comes to fruition. We can eat it all.